Our film begins with Officer Paul in the year 1999 in Louisiana, in a nursing home, and he is watching the film Top Hat and he starts to cry, so his colleague asks him why the film reminds him of his life in the year 1935, when he was working as a corrections officer in Cold Mountain Prison, and he tells her that he was responsible for the death row inmates block, and that he was supervising all the executions that took place, and that this block was called the Green Mile, because the floor of the block was light green in color. And the film's events go back to the year 1935, and Paul is a young officer, and with him are his assistants Dean, Harry, and Brutal, and the arrogant, rotten officer Percy, and they are receiving John Coffey, the largest prisoner Paul has ever seen in his life, and they put him in his cell, and he returns to his office and reads John's file, and what was written in it was that one day the two little girls, Katie and Cora, disappear from their home, and their father Klaus searches for them, and finds traces of blood on the doorstep of the house, so he screams, and starts searching for them with the townspeople until he finds them dead on John's lap, and he is crying, and says that he couldn't help them, and he is arrested on charges of raping the two girls, and Paul submits his report to Hal Moores, the head of the prison, whose wife Melinda is suffering from a very severe brain tumor, and he asks him to put up with Percy a bit because he is the nephew of the governor's wife, and that he doesn't need problems from the governor, and anyway, he is likely to leave soon because he got an administrative job in a private mental hospital, so he might leave, and they hand him the execution warrant for a prisoner he has named Arlen Bitterbuck, and once, while they are in the office, they notice the mouse, Dell, inside the prison, and they keep watching it until it enters the solitary confinement room, and he takes out everyone in the room hoping to find the mouse, but they fail, and it appears the next day in front of Percy, and without any introduction, he tries to kill it and runs after it to kill it, but he fails, and he enters the solitary confinement room again, and Paul and Bitterbuck watch him as he takes everyone out of the room again, hoping to catch the mouse, and he fails miserably, and he leaves and goes to complete the procedures for Arlen's execution, and it was part of the electric chair procedures that they do a mock rehearsal on the prisoner to make sure all the procedures are correct, and Percy attends the rehearsal and learns the controls for operating the electric chair, and learns how to operate them from Officer Van Hay, and they ask him why we put a wet sponge on the prisoner's head, so he tells him and explains that it conducts electricity quickly to the brain, so the prisoner dies without pain from the electricity, and after that, they prepare the execution room for the execution of Arlen, which takes place exactly at 10 in the morning, and Percy prays in an insulting way, and that upset Paul, and he said to him, "The administrative job is waiting for you, why don't you leave the prison?" So Percy replied to him and said, "When you let me carry out an execution like Brutal, then I will leave." So Paul left him and returned to his office, but he hears the sound of laughter coming from Dell's cell, and is surprised that he is playing with the mouse, which he named Mr. Jingles, and he calls him to his office to inform him that a new prisoner is coming named William, and that he has many problems and causes even more problems. The last of which is that he killed 3 people in an armed robbery, including a pregnant woman. So Paul asked him about his wife's condition, and he replied and told him that the tumor is severe, and that she can't have an operation and unfortunately can't be treated. And after he goes home, he gets a severe pain, so he gets up from his sleep and runs out of his house so as not to worry his wife Jane, and the next day he comes and tells his wife to book an appointment for him with the doctor because the pain is very severe and is still bothering him until now. And after that, he goes up to the prison to receive William, the new prisoner, who, during his transfer, upon entering the cell, starts hitting everyone around him until Brutal comes from behind and hits him on the head, and they throw him in the cell, and they all go to finish the administrative work with the prison warden, and Paul is left alone. So John Coffey calls to him and says, "Come close to me," and John suddenly grabs him and puts his hand on the place of the pain that he has until the pain disappears from Paul's body, and he looks at him and says, "I helped you like this." And he returns to his wife, very happy that the pain has lessened, and the next day he returns to the prison and brings food to John and thanks him for what he did for him. William's problems continue until they decide to throw him in the solitary confinement room and beat him up in their own way, and the time for Dell's execution comes, and they bring him in, and Wild and Brutal are there to reassure him that the mouse will stay with one of them, and during their conversation, Mr. Jingles runs from Wild, so Percy steps on him and is happy, so Wild becomes angry because of the death of his mouse, but John catches him and puts it in his hand and gives it to John, who saves Mr. Jingles and protects him once again, and Percy goes to the execution, they hit him and tell him that this is your last execution, and after that, you will leave the prison, go anywhere else, and in fact, they agree with him, and Percy is the supervisor for placing the wet sponge that makes the prisoner die without pain, but he accidentally wets it and puts it on Wild's head while it is dry, and the execution is carried out in a painful way, and all the prison staff know that Percy intended to torture him, so nerves flare up, and they start beating Percy until Hal intervenes and asks about what happened and knows that Percy is the reason, but because of his connections, he doesn't do anything. The next day, Paul and his wife visit Melinda, Hal's wife, to check on her because her condition is worsening, and after that, he holds a meeting at his house gathering all the prison team except Percy, and he tells them that he has decided to take John Coffey out of the prison and take him to Melinda to try to help her in his way, and he begins implementing his plan, which is that they put a sedative in the Pepsi and give it to William, and throw Percy in the solitary confinement room, and they take John out of the prison and go to Hal's house, who comes out to them, so Paul makes him understand that he might be able to help his wife, so he brings her out and he approaches her, and indeed John is able to heal her in his way, and they return to the prison and open the cell door for Percy, and tell him, the time has come for you to leave the prison. They take Percy out of the cell, but they catch John, and he transfers the exhaustion that was in him in his way, and made it like a magnetic sedative. So he walked to William's cell and raised his gun and shot William with all the bullets he had. So John said to Paul, I punished the two together because I saw what William did. Give me your hand, I'll show you what William did. And he held Paul's hand, and in a supernatural way, he showed him that William was the one who was with Klaus, the father of the girls who died, and that he was the one who raped them and killed them and threw them, and that John was trying to heal them like the mouse and Melinda, but he failed. And an investigation is conducted into William's killing, but Percy loses his mind and goes to the mental illness hospital, but as a patient. And at that time, Paul became certain of John's innocence, and offered to help him escape from the prison if he wanted. But John said, I feel that I should die because I am tired of the loneliness and the darkness and the world. So Paul asked him, do you have a last wish that I can fulfill for you? He said, I have never watched a cinema film. So they play the film Top Hat for John, and they all watch the film. And the next day, the time for John Coffey's execution comes, and he is on the electric chair, and he asks him not to cover his face because he is afraid of the darkness. And the execution is carried out, and that is the end of the story that Paul is telling to his colleague in the nursing home. And he said to her that after that he requested a transfer to a juvenile prison, and she asks him, what are these juveniles? That was in the year 1939, and now we are in the year 1999, meaning you have lived a very long time. He said to her, I am living because of the miracle of my healing that was at the hands of John. I have lived a long time already, and I will live even more, me and Mr. Jingles, so that I see all my loved ones die, just as I saw my wife, my son, and my colleagues die, and I will still live and attend your funeral, and the funeral of everyone I have known in my life. Perhaps this is my punishment for letting John be executed unjustly, and I wish to rest soon so I can meet all my loved ones.